Can the US dollar remain the global reserve currency?
Absolutely not.
So there's a very, very strong motivation for a lot of countries to move away from the dollar.
The US dollar is in danger of losing its status as the world's reserve currency. So how likely is a capital war between China and the US?
The US national debt is more than $28 trillion. It's a massive number.
Bigger than the size of our economy.
In fact, it's the biggest debt in the world, but the US government keeps spending more than it brings in.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
People need to start taking this seriously or it'll be too late.
With the COVID pandemic, government spending has exploded, even as demands for more government programs are growing. But who will end up paying for all this?
It's Washington, D.C.'s game of kicking the can, and your kids are going to be it.
We are being distracted. I don't know how many others feel something big on the horizon, but it feels like every day we are getting closer and closer to a major event. There's so many major chess moves happening that are undoubtedly about bringing the new world that they are trying to create. But yet there is so little discussion about this in the mainstream. They just have us simmering like frogs, waiting for them to make their next move. I still keep warning people, and you would think that with this much happening over the past year, people would have their guards up, ready for anything. But it seems the people just don't care. I mean, just last year, suddenly, the world was told that we were being attacked by a virus and that the whole world needed to shut down abruptly. A majority of the world went on lockdown. Then, in the United States, we saw protests raging in a majority of the major cities around the country. We saw a president ousted after there was an attack on the United States Capitol. And we saw a record money printing that produced 3 stimulus payments for the country. Not to leave out, they produced a solution to COVID in record time that's using never-before-used technology. And that's just the major events I could think of off the top of my head. All of this happening over the course of 1.5 years, you would think that everyone would be on edge and cautious, wondering what else could be around the corner. But no, everyone is distracted, focused on getting their life back that they once had, focused on obtaining this world. If only that was our reality, and there wasn't major pressing issues standing at the door. For us, we cannot afford to be asleep like them, because at some point soon, sudden destruction will come upon them, and they will not be able to stand, and they will be herded into whatever direction is planned for them. So for me, I feel pressed and led to keep those who are awake, or who are trying to wake up, awakened to what's happening, along with giving a dose of reality. One reason I know there is no time for us to be complacent and relaxed is because of the numbers. Now, in true reality, I think the actual numbers are ridiculously crazy, but I don't have enough evidence to speak on them. But if we just use the numbers and the narrative that we are given, plus what is happening right now, it becomes very clear that we should all be prepared for a big event to happen that will change this world forever. I'm going to talk about this event and what it seems that they are preparing to happen along with it. I want you to be as ready as you can, not living in fear, but in strength. Let's begin. So let me just jump right into it. We are approaching a collapse in our world monetary system. This fiat money system that has been running off of central banks around the world printing their own money has finally run its course. There were no hopes for it before COVID, but after what they did during the times of COVID, everyone really should be expecting a change. It really seems very obvious as well, which really just shows how sedated the population is. Because not only are the currencies around the world being overprinted, and they are telling us about inflation, but there is also world acceptance of a new type of currency that is competing with this financial system. People are actually investing in it, hoping for their values to rise. Most of them not even understanding that they are betting against their current way of life and future. It really shows just how incompetent we are as a people. I venture to say this is the least intelligent generation in the history of the world. Not least educated, but least able to use their minds collectively to produce rational thought. But I don't want to get off track and go off on a tangent. Listen, people can go on all day and ignore everything going on around them, but it still won't stop what's coming. We will have a collapse of the United States dollar in the very near-term future, And this will affect every living person in the world. It will hurt the countries that are completely attached to the dollar and trading with the United States the most. But it will affect everyone, make no mistake. Now, I have made multiple videos about this. I've spoken extensively about the problems with the dollar and why a collapse of it is inevitable. But I want to give a more recent overview to bring it all together, seeing that we are so close to this event. What we are seeing is that they have severely weakened the currency to a point where they cannot ever fix it, and their only hope is to create a new system and have war to protect their standing. That's the simplest explanation I can give. To understand this, the first thing we must do is come into a true economic reality. Because the United States currency, the dollar, is right now the most important currency in the world, we first need to look at the finances of the country that is promoting this currency to the world. We need to look at our debt. Now, before we go over what it is currently, please note that in the year 2000, when President Clinton left office, the debt was at $5.8 trillion. Today, the debt is currently at $28.3 trillion, almost half a trillion more, that's $500 billion, than it was at the time of the inauguration in January, and almost 500% more in just 20 years. And we have another president in office right now who promises to do nothing but spend. If you listen to his agenda, this is his primary plan to fix the country: borrow, tax, and spend more money. If you want to believe that none of them know what they are doing and what the risks are, that's just not true. Let me remind you of what I shared in the video, What Are You Expecting in 2021, when Senator Rand Paul spoke about our debt.
If free money were the answer, if money really grew on trees, why not give more free money? Why not give it out all the time? Why stop at $600 a person? Why not $1,000? Why not $2,000? Maybe these new free money Republicans should join the Everybody Gets a Guaranteed Income caucus. Why not $20,000 a year for everybody? Why not $30,000? If we can print up money with impunity, why not do it? The Treasury can just keep printing the money. That is, until someone points out that the emperor has no clothes and that the dollar no longer has value. How bad is our fiscal situation? Well, the federal government brought in $3.3 trillion last year and spent $6.6 trillion. The deficit last year, a record-busting $3.3 trillion. It's opening the economy. We're not even debating the real answer to this. We're like, just print up the money and shovel it out the door. The deficit be damned. The threat of the destruction of our currency be damned.
You see, they all know that there's a major risk in what they're doing. Now, before we get into the actual dollar collapse, let me also share what they have done with spending during COVID. In the United States, we had 3 stimulus bills, and today they're actually alluding to another one. There was the CARES Act for $1.8 trillion passed in March of 2020. Then we had the omnibus spending and COVID relief bill passed in December of 2020. That was for $1.4 trillion. And the third bill, the American Rescue Plan stimulus bill, was for $1.9 trillion, just 3 months after the last trillion. It was a total of $5.1 trillion in just a year, just on extra money to stimulate the economy. And let me ask you, does it look like they're stopping?
President Biden has marked his first 100 days in office by launching radical and ambitious proposals for America, a once-in-a-generation investment plan, as he called it. If enacted, it could be transformational, but it comes at a huge cost, a $4 trillion price tag. The American Families Plan aims to cut child poverty and put a cap on childcare costs. Joe Biden wants to create millions of jobs through a massive program of investment in infrastructure, broadband, and green energy. And he plans to address those key issues of police reform and gun control.
The President of the United States.
Because of COVID and social distancing, the audience was much smaller. But the pandemic has given Joe Biden the space to come up with a set of radical proposals that are a break with 40 years of economic orthodoxy. Big government, tax and spend are back. But a lot of people thought the 78-year-old would be a transitional president. Wrong. He's set on transformation, with his plans for European-style welfare policies, a green agenda, and the thing he kept on repeating last night, creating new jobs.
They are spending and spending big, with plans that expand the role of government in the country while adding taxes to corporations that had never been there before. People are so trained to look at things from their political perspective, but please step aside from your mind control view of politics. The United States is spending more than it makes, proposing new taxes on the biggest employers, which always stifles growth. If you look at reality, it's easy to see there are major risks in play. But let's step aside from those points. The point I was trying to display is that our debt has been moving dramatically unsustainable for the past 2 decades, and there are no signs of things slowing down. Mark that off in your understanding. Now, how is the rest of the world reacting to the dollar? Because if this is just a United States issue and the rest of the world is okay with how the US is acting with its currency, then the risk level is low. I am running into a lot of people that are saying that the debt doesn't matter because the United States prints their own money. And in truth, they're right. The debt doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but that is a very dangerous way of thinking about a very big matter. The debt doesn't matter to the United States, no, because they can just print more money to cover their expenses. But here's the thing. The United States, being the major world reserve currency, must have demand from the other countries around the world to use the dollar in order for there not to be an issue. You see, the United States is not just printing and circulating money within the United States. No, it prints money for the rest of the world to use as well, because of trade and more specifically, trading oil. You have heard of the petrodollar, right? Oil is priced and sold in dollars, which is why the United States dollar is so important to the world. In order for any country to buy oil, they must use dollars. Now, our debt is important not because we can't pay it, but because other countries know that in order for us to keep up with our obligations, it would require more printing of dollars, which then in turn costs them more to buy oil because of inflation. I will get to inflation in a sec, but let's understand what the other countries are saying about the dollar. Now, let's make this clear. In your overall perspective of things, you need to understand the power that the dollar being the reserve currency of the world brings the United States. Because if printing your own money without care or caution was an acceptable strategy, then every country in the world would do it without risk and everyone would be good. All Venezuela would need to do is just print more money. But there's more to it than that.
70-year-old Artemio Fermin has to go to the bank at least 4 times to withdraw his monthly pension.
Yesterday morning, I waited in a line of 200 people for my turn.
But he wasn't allowed to withdraw more than a fraction of his meager pension in cash. So this morning, Mr. Fermin returns to the bank. And after a while, he emerges with a bit more money.
They're only giving pensioners 30,000 bolívares in cash, 20,000 for everyone else, the same as yesterday.
It's not enough. With inflation now surpassing 700% and rising, the cash he was able to extract is just enough to pay for some bananas and a carton of eggs. Lines for food, medicine, and basic goods aren't new, but scarcity has now even hit Venezuela's currency. The central bank can't seem to print it fast enough. Whenever and wherever possible, people pay with debit or credit cards to bypass the need for cash altogether.
The calculations are enough to make anyone dizzy, but just so that you have an idea, this 100 Bolivar note was the highest denomination up until December. You need 3 of them, or 300 Bolívares today, just to buy a piece of chewing gum. This is a 20,000 Bolivar note, now the largest. But on this day, it was the maximum amount that a person could take out of the bank in cash, just enough to buy this kilo of cheese.
Economics plays a huge part, and to understand the value of something, you must always consider the supply versus the demand. In the case with the United States dollar being the world reserve currency, The other countries in the world are not happy with the power that the reserve currency status gives the United States. The status allows the United States to make weapons of war indefinitely because their dollar is used everywhere and wanted everywhere, which then helps them bomb wherever they would like in the world. It also allows them to weaponize the dollar itself, which is when they put sanctions on countries and individuals, not giving them access to the dollar system. It also gives the United States the right to be able to tell other countries how to run their own country, which many countries are sick of at this point. Bottom line, the dollar gives the United States a lot of power that it is not managing well, and this leads to other countries not wanting the dollar to hold its reign as king. This is why we have seen Russia years ago making adjustments against the dollar, selling their oil in euros, as well as recently China making closer ties in the Middle East to sell oil in their currency of the yuan, some coining it the petro-yuan.
Well, this week history was made when the Shanghai International Energy Exchange launched the first crude futures contracts priced in Chinese renminbi or yuan. It is an attempt to turn the global oil market on its head. China, the world's biggest oil importer, buys around 9 million barrels of oil every day. And it wants to use its own currency to price the world's most traded commodity. You've heard of petrodollars, but what about petro-yuan? The US dollar has been the main currency for oil futures contracts, so launching a contract in its domestic currency is a sign that China wants the yuan to play a bigger role in global oil trading. China is also taking on the world's most used oil benchmarks, Brent and WTI crude, which are both priced in dollars.
In fact, China has done this in great scale, moving with the times, and made their currency digital like Bitcoin, making a cryptocurrency that assists with the cross-border payments. But I don't want to get ahead of myself.
As the Biden administration throws its support behind a $1.9 trillion stimulus package, major countries like China and Russia are steadily pulling their support from the U.S. dollar, raising questions about where it'll stand in the years to come and how its continued decline will impact the American people. RT's Rachel Blevins is joining us now from the newsroom with more details on this. So, Rachel, what can you tell us?
Well, Manila, the state of the U.S. economy is raising alarm bells around the world for just about anyone looking beyond the stock market right now. And many are warning about the state of the U.S. dollar. Amid an already looming recession, a year of historic unemployment, and an estimated $5 trillion in combined stimulus, the U.S. dollar is trading at its lowest levels in 3 years. Just 6 months ago, economist and former bank chairman Stephen Roach was criticized for predicting that a crash in the dollar was coming and that it would decline by 35% by the end of 2021. While some pointed to the optimism seen in the stock market surrounding the 2020 election, Roach continued to stand by his prediction, noting that markets right now are focusing on one main thing, which is the Federal Reserve holding interest rates at zero no matter what happens. He said, quote, "That gives the market's conviction to look through literally anything, from political insurrection to the likelihood of a double dip to a V-shaped recovery that's in tatters. The markets do not seem to care." But the rest of the world does care. And while the U.S. has long relied on its status as the world's reserve currency, countries like China and Russia have been taking steps to pull away from the U.S. dollar. While Moscow used to be one of the top holders of U.S. treasuries, increasing tensions between the two countries and a host of sanctions from the U.S. under the Obama administration pushed Russia to reduce its reliance on the dollar in recent years. Beijing found itself in the same boat with the Trump administration, as the U.S. increased its military presence in the South China Sea and launched a historic trade war between the world's two largest economies. As a result, reports noted that in the first quarter of 2020, the dollar's share of trade between Russia and China fell below 50% for the first time on record. Now, Manila, while we have watched China and Russia reduce their reliance on the dollar, other currencies like the euro have benefited, showing the world that they don't have to rely on the U.S. dollar as much as they once did.
Says it plans to stop investing in dollar-denominated assets through its sovereign wealth fund in response to rising U.S. sanctions. Speaking at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in Moscow, Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov said the $186 billion National Wealth Fund will instead increase investments in the euro, Chinese yuan and gold. The announcement comes just days before Russian President Vladimir Putin meets his US counterpart Joe Biden in Geneva. Meanwhile, Moscow is trying to deepen economic ties with other countries, with more than 300 agreements being inked at this year's event. Participants are also debating the adoption of green technologies.
This news from Russia is a big deal and goes over a big trend happening in the world. And that's what I'm trying to bring a focus upon. Countries around the world are making moves to soften the blow of the United States dollar collapse, and that's what we're seeing happening. A few months ago, I explained a big topic. That is of the Great Reset, which is how they label the transition into their New World Order. In the book about the Great Reset, written by Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, it speaks in great detail about the things that would change in regards to this Great Reset. If you have not watched this video, you are doing yourself a disservice, because this is what the world is planning around you. You should understand it. Now, in regards to the economic reset, listen to what it says about the United States dollar. He writes this, 1.2.3.2, The Fate of the United States Dollar, page 72. For decades, the United States has enjoyed the exorbitant privilege of retaining the global currency reserve, a status that has long been a perk of imperial might and economic elixir. To a considerable extent, American power and prosperity have been built and reinforced by the global trust in the dollar and the willingness of customers abroad to hold it, most often in the form of United States government bonds. For quite some time, some analysts and policymakers have been considering a possible and progressive end to the dominance of the dollar. They now think that the pandemic might be the catalyst that proves them right. On the one hand, managing the economy sensibly, doubters of the US dollar dominance point to the inevitable and sharp deterioration of the US fiscal position. In their mind, unsustainable levels of debt will eventually erode confidence in the United States dollar. Just prior to the pandemic, United States defense spending, plus interest on the federal debt, plus annual entitlement payments, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, represented 112% of federal tax receipts versus 95% in 2017. This unsustainable path will worsen in the post-pandemic, post-bailout era. This argument suggests that something major will therefore have to change, either through a much reduced geopolitical role or higher taxation, or both. Otherwise, the rising deficit will reach a threshold beyond which non-US investors are unwilling to fund it. After all, the status of reserve currency cannot last longer than foreign confidence in the ability of the holder to honor its payments. As for a global virtual currency, there is none in sight yet, but there are attempts to launch national digital currencies that may eventually dethrone the United States dollar supremacy. Ultimately, the possible end of the United States dollar primacy will depend on what happens in the United States. As Henry Paulson, a former U.S. Treasury Secretary, says, U.S. dollar prominence begins at home. The United States must maintain an economy that inspires global credibility and confidence. Failure to do so will, over time, put the U.S. dollar's position in peril. You see, they are telling it clear to those paying attention. What I am trying to convey is that the world is gearing up for this collapse of the dollar right now. Now, here's the thing. When we say dollar collapse, it's not the same thing as a stock market collapse. You see, in a stock market collapse, you will see the value of the stock market declining. You see, a company that was trading at $100 per share could be trading at $18 per share at the end of the stock market collapse. That is not the same thing as a dollar collapse. It's actually the opposite in effect. When we see a dollar collapse happen, we will not see the value of things decline, but we will see the cost of things rise dramatically. We will first start seeing inflation, and then when it gets really bad, hyperinflation. Then you'll see that the same dollar that was once able to buy you a can of soda won't be able to do the same, and you might need an extra dollar for that soda or more. We will start seeing the dollar be able to buy us less. It will cost more for the same lifestyle we once had, and that is what inflation is: the cost of items rising. Remember, I said the biggest risk isn't about our debt, but the demand for dollars decreasing, which would then cause inflation. And with the United States printing, it would cause hyperinflation. We have printed more dollars, but less people want to use them. This causes inflation, and we are seeing this happen right now. Now, if you're paying attention, we are being told that inflation is here, but at the same time, and often in the same breath, they are telling us that is nothing to worry about. And this is why we are simmering like frogs. Americans in particular are not able to put two and two together that the cost of goods are rising right after they pumped free money to the masses for over a year. And the craziest part is that we have Bitcoin and other digital currencies that everyone is investing in that is literally going against the future that they are trying to protect. Bitcoin is a new currency and financial system that completely goes against the dollar system. It's the replacement of the fiat currency system. And the only person I am really hearing giving warnings about it is the person that everyone has been trained to ignore and hate.
Never seen anything like this, but the economy, you've got inflation that's going to be rampant. And we've seen inflation before you have. I remember you a long time ago when the world was cratering and Jimmy Carter and all of this stuff, the things that were happening were not even believable, where interest rates were going up to 22%. Prime rate was over 20%. It's what's going on now is exactly the same, but it's worse. It's much worse. What they're doing now guarantees, and you already have massive inflation. Look at food prices. Look at gasoline. We had energy independence, and now that's gone, Stuart. It's gone. When I left, gasoline was $1.87. Now it's, going to be double that. It's going to be triple and quadruple that. But food prices, everything is going. Lumber for a house is up at a level that it's never been. It's massive inflation.
I'll ask you one last question. You don't like Bitcoin? You wouldn't invest in Bitcoin? Do you invest in the stock market at this moment?
So not at this moment. I think it's high. So I have not invested in the stock market at this moment. I have in the past, but I have not at this moment. I think it's high. Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam. I was surprised. With us, it was at 6,000 and much lower. I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar. Essentially, it's a currency competing against the dollar. I want the dollar to be the currency of the world. That's what I've always said.
Now, this is not to give credibility to Trump, because he is just a tool of controlled opposition. And when you hear him speak, you can still see he's a part of the overall game. And we also have the Republicans speaking on this, but that's all for show and political theater.
I got up here a little over 2 years ago. I've been talking about inflation and the risk of excessive government spending causing inflation. Joe Biden won't talk about it. Where's Joe Biden? He will not talk about inflation, even though he's proposed $7.1 trillion in spending. Historically, government spending has always caused inflation, excessive government spending. So this is a kitchen table issue going on all across our country right now. People are worried about inflation. So milk being up, bread being up, gas being up, who's it impact? It doesn't change the life of the rich. It's the poor, the people on fixed income. So if you're on fixed income and all these things go up, your wages aren't going up. If you're a poor family, your wages never go up as fast as inflation is going up. We have got to stop this reckless spending. Joe Biden's, all of his ideas of $7.1 trillion is going to make it worse.
Don't buy into the Republican versus Democrat conflict. Everyone is on the same side behind the scenes. So the point that I want registered with you from everything shown from this point is that based on our debt, we know that the United States is not in a great financial standing, and it also has increasingly unsustainable record debt. It's actually the most debt in the history of the world. They are still spending with no end in sight. Countries like Russia and China are making moves of de-dollarization. That's to reduce their dependence on dollars, not to hold any more dollars or to trade in them. while China has also made a digital yuan that is said to compete with the dollar against economic sanctions and the trading of oil. And to go right along with this, there is Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, which is actually a hedge against inflation and a direct competitor against the fiat currency system. And this is not a faraway situation, but one that is pressing right now, because inflation in the United States is currently surging, and countries around the world are starting to adopt the new Bitcoin system, just as we see El Salvador just do.
Queda aprobada la ley de Bitcoin.
Lawmakers in El Salvador broke into applause after voting to approve Bitcoin as legal tender on Wednesday, making the Central American country the first in the world to fully adopt the cryptocurrency.
Bitcoiners around the world, the time has come. We are ready.
It's all happening step by step right in our faces. Now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are not the savior of finance, just like many people are alluding to. It's the new system, and we need to discuss that later. But with all of these facts that I've just pointed out, I think this is a good synopsis of the risk that we're currently in. With all the money printing, with people investing in cryptocurrencies, with the stock market being at all-time highs for no reason, people are still betting on the United States dollar to have dominance, even though all these other things are happening around it that says that the world is preparing for a new system. And I made this video to assure you that you need to be in reality and you need to understand that the collapse of the United States dollar is something that is coming. It's nothing that you need to ignore. Now, before I talk about a solution, let me tell you how I see things actually happening. Because I don't believe that all of a sudden we'll see a random collapse of the dollar. No. In this instant dollar collapse situation, there will be too much direct blame at the leaders in the United States. And that's not how the system operates. Based on what we are seeing, everyone should expect two major things to coincide with the collapse of the dollar. A major cyber attack and or an EMP attack on the United States, followed by the blaming of Russia and or China and or Iran, which will be the reason given for the collapse of the dollar, which will provoke a military move, meaning war. So you'll first see an attack, like a cyber attack, an EMP, blaming an outsider like Russia or China, and then you see war that goes along with the collapse of the dollar. If you're paying attention, we can see all the preliminary building up of this narrative.
It comes as the White House warns businesses big and small to take immediate action to protect themselves after cyber attacks on subways, ferries, and the U.S. food and fuel supplies. Tonight, the targets most at risk and the specific changes they're being advised to make right now. The
collapse of the dollar will affect every person in the world for one reason or another. This is not something that we can hide from. Now, there are actions that those of us that are awake can take. I have made a specific video discussing how to prepare for the collapse, but it was 2 years ago and probably needs to be updated post-COVID. So I will see how Father leads with that. But in the end, there is really one solution against this whole situation that we are sprinting towards. The answer is not in the physical. Yes, there are certain physical and mental preparations that you can take to be ready for this, but all those preparations are about buying time. Don't get it twisted. Though it seems like it's a secular event, that this is really all about the world, it's actually a very spiritual, religious thing, and the answer is not found in yourself. You are not the answer or the solution. Your wit or ability to problem solve will not save you. It may buy you more time than others, but I promise you, it's not about you. This is about the world moving to a new world order, where Satan is knowingly worshipped as God in the hearts of every man, woman, and child on earth that is not written in the book of life. That is the goal, and there are secular events that will lead us into chaos so that their order can be formed. I have made this video to highlight the issues in front of us, because things are moving very fast, and everyone should have an idea of what is going on. But none of this is really about geopolitics or economics and monetary policy. Those things are just spokes in the wheel that assist these satanic worshiping leaders with creating their order that helps Satan feel like the Most High. This is all a very spiritual situation, and the only answer is true repentance and belief in the true Messiah that was sent to take the penalty of our sins, and through him find redemption and are able to come to our Father. There is no answer without belief in Yahshua the Messiah, in English tongue transliterated to Jesus Christ. You must believe in him and come to him immediately. He promised us, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. Revelation chapter 3, verse 10 and 11. You see, that hour of trial is coming now, and you must make the decision to stay connected to Father through Yahshua and follow his commands. That is what this channel is about, and if you search through these videos, this ministry can assist you in getting to know him. But he is the only answer, so please seek him now. This is happening whether you like it or not. Whether you want to ignore it or make excuses, it's happening. The worst thing that can happen to you is that you're asleep to it and it catches you off guard. The only thing we can do is focus on what matters and live for him. Live for him, be obedient to him, and follow his ways and commands. Time is running out, so make sure you make the right decision today and submit to Yah. The more we hear inflation, the more we know this dollar is on its last leg. Just because the world is about to change doesn't mean you have to change with it. Stand as an immovable force in your faith, and our Father will carry you and do the rest. The choice is yours, and it's an easy one. Believe in the gospel, the good news, and be saved. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share it with others. Everyone you know needs to understand that this dollar is going to collapse. If you have not done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I upload every Friday. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I really would like to thank all those who support this ministry. You know who you are. Your contributions have been an extreme blessing to this ministry, and I'm very thankful for you. Thank you for being a blessing and your continued support to this mission. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.